Hey guys, tonight we slide open the lacquered doors of an underheated Tang Dynasty office building, shuffle past the paper lanterns and scroll cubbies, and finally settle behind the desk of one of history's least celebrated but most stationary heroes, the Tang Bureaucrat. That's right, we're going full deep dive on how these civil service champions decorated their desks. Yes, really, if you're not asleep halfway through the inkstone portion, you probably won't survive the elbow pillow reveal. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit stiffly, your robe slightly too formal for comfort. The room smells faintly of sandalwood and bureaucratic dread. A single window lets in gray morning light filter through rice paper, and before you stretches a desk. Not just any desk, mind you, but your desk, your throne, your canvas, your professional stage. And the first item that defines this hallowed space? The inkstone. It's not just a tool, it's a decoration. A slab of carved slate or stone, often with miniature dragons curled along the rim, or a gentle basin carved to look like a lotus pond. Yours, of course, is only mildly ostentatious, an oblong piece of Duan stone with subtle waves etched into its face. You run a finger over the shallow groove where water meets ink and feel the cool potential of 10,000 bureaucratic decorations. Historians still argue whether civil servants were allowed to commission personal inkstones or if they were standardized by rank. But looking at yours, which you may or may not have received as a subtle bribe from your cousin who sells them, it's hard to imagine everyone being so restrained. Beside it, resting like a small sleeping fox, is your elbow cushion. Now, this isn't some frilly afterthought. No, it's essential. Writing with a brush all day puts a strain on the forearm, and these silk-stuffed pillows help keep the flow smooth and the calligraphy graceful. Yours is embroidered with a scene of geese over water. Symbolic, probably. You forget what the geese mean. Maybe tranquility, or salary raises. It's all the same once the tea wears off. At this early hour, you arrange your brush set with quiet reverence. Each brush has its place, and your ink stick rests like a blade waiting to be ground. There's something profoundly meditative about preparing your own ink, rubbing the solid stick in circular patterns against the inkstone, watching the liquid darken like storm clouds gathering over a ledger. Your neighbors on either side have their own desk rituals. To your left, Senior Clerk Wong thumps his brush into the ink with the enthusiasm of someone who hasn't read a poem since childhood. To your right, Assistant Scribe may flicks her ink with feather-like precision, her elbow pillow shaped like a peony. You wonder if she judges your goose motif. Probably. A fun but little-known fact. Some elite clerks during the Tang period actually named their inkstones. Pet names, inscriptions, even small backstories. You consider calling yours a dripper of destiny. But that might be a bit much, especially since it still leaks occasionally. The office is quiet, save for the whisper paper and the sighing of government workers beginning another day of scroll copying, tax auditing, and trying not to get demoted. You roll your shoulders, take a long breath, and begin composing a report on grain storage ratios in the western provinces. Riveting stuff, assuming your grain. Even here, desk style is performance, a signal to visiting inspectors, potential rivals, or that one calligraphy-obsessed prefect who wanders by once a week pretending not to judge brush technique. The inkstone and elbow pillow aren't just ergonomic solutions, they're statements. You belong here. You're competent. You probably know the Confucian Analects by heart, or at least by strategic citation. Now, not every Tang bureaucrat had flair. Some desks were pure function, basic inkstone, flat cushion, maybe a water bowl. But others, well, let's just say some scholars suggest desks could become full-on aesthetic battlegrounds. Who had the fanciest stone? The finest cushion? The best brush stand shaped like a phoenix biting a pearl? Historians still debate whether this decorative arms race affected promotions. Probably not officially. Probably yes unofficially. You take a moment to admire your neighbor's inkstone, a dramatic tiger-shaped piece that somehow seems to snarl at your goose. But you're not here for competition. You're here for competence. and to not spill ink on your robe again like last Tuesday. The day stretches ahead like a scroll unrolled across time. You dip your brush, steady your wrist on the cushion, and begin your elegant, measured strokes. There's a gentle rhythm to it. The brush whispers against the paper, like wind through bamboo. You lose yourself in the repetition. The bureaucracy becomes a kind of meditation. Your desk, your gear, your tools, even your humble elbow pillow makes it bearable, maybe even beautiful. And while you're not allowed to say it out loud, this desk is your world, your seat of power. A small corner of wood and ink where history is slowly copied, line by line, stroke by stroke. You pause only when your elbow starts tingling, flexing gently to shake off the sensation. Maybe that goose cushion isn't as supportive as you thought. You make a mental note. Next market day, check out the shop near Southgate. They have elbow pillows with foxes now. Or maybe cranes. Now that your inkstone's primed and your elbow cushion fluffed just right, at least until that new crane-embroidered one makes its debut, it's time to address the tangled little ecosystem of writing tools creeping across your desk, not the papers themselves. No, we're talking brush holders, the scaffolding of a Tang official's creative mess, and, surprisingly, feather dusters. Yes, even in the 9th century, desk hygiene mattered. To your modern eye, the brush holder might seem like a glorified pencil case. But in Tang times, it was both a status marker and a minor art installation. Yours is modest, relatively speaking. Carved from boxwood with a mountain motif, designed to hold 5 brushes at once. Each slot cradles a brush with bristles of different thickness. One for fine characters, one for broad headers, one for messy emergency drafts, and 2 backups in case of hair-shedding disasters. Don't laugh. It happens more than you'd think, especially with cheap squirrel fur. Historians still argue whether brush holders were regulated for clerks of different ranks, or whether it was a free-for-all, like an ancient version of who gets to decorate their cubicle with Funko Pops. Some scrolls suggest a limit on luxury. Ivory holders were supposedly frowned upon unless you had an imperial endorsement. But as always, exceptions were made for gifts, heirlooms, or items that just happened to show up on your desk one morning. The guy 2 desks down, official Liao, absolutely has an ivory holder with a phoenix on it. He pretends it's bone. Everyone knows it's not. And then there's the unsung hero, the feather duster. This little puffball on a stick may seem like overkill, but in the Tang administrative world, where open windows meant open invitations for dust, insect wings, and the occasional poetic leaf fragment, keeping the desk clean was practically a moral duty. A dusty desk hinted at a dusty soul, or worse, a lazy one. Your feather duster is made from crane feathers, ethically sourced, allegedly, and bound to a thin bamboo rod. Every morning, you give your inkstone, brush rack, and elbow cushion a gentle sweep, moving like a bored priest wafting incense. It's oddly satisfying, even meditative. The soft rasp of feather against wood, the tiny clouds of lint spinning into the air. And yes, sometimes you sweep nothing at all, just to give the impression of being industrious when someone higher rank walks by. It's practically performance art. An actual recorded regulation from mid-Tang bureaucratic manuals included desk cleanliness as a reflection of discipline. So, technically, your duster wielding is career maintenance. You're not procrastinating. You're preserving moral order. A quirky detail you wouldn't expect. Feather dusters weren't only for dust. Some officials use them to flick away insects, wipe stray ink blotches off their sleeves, and, brace yourself, even gently discipline pet crickets. Yes, more on that soon, but for now, know this, your duster might be the most versatile object in your office arsenal. You pause, brushing a smear of ink from the corner of your document, then lean back. There's a faint creak from the woven seat of your chair. Across the office, assistant scribe maid gives her brush holder a spritz of water from a tiny copper sprayer, supposedly to maintain humidity. You suspect it's mostly to look busy. She's already copied 3 pages while you're still writing the preamble. Bureaucratic life in Chang'an, capital of the Tang Dynasty, is nothing if not a social ecosystem. Status comes in subtle waves. Who has a jade brush rest, who uses ordinary stone, whose feathered duster has matching tassels. You've seen one poor intern try to pass off a carved wooden toothbrush holder as a brush stand. It did not go well. Some clerks go overboard. They hang miniature wind chimes on their brush racks or balance miniature scrolls on top for a lived-in look. You once saw a guy in records bring in a brush stand shaped like a peacock. It shed gold flakes for days. Still, the quiet shuffle of feathers, the alignment of brushes according to size or occasion, it all builds the rhythm of your morning. It's not just about aesthetics. It's about ritual. It's about establishing your little sphere of control in a world full of unpredictable audits and suspiciously long lunch breaks. You reach over and nudge your thickest brush slightly so it lines up just right with the edge of the stand. This is your calm before the scroll storm. Everything in its place. A small, carefully ordered rebellion against the chaos of tax records and land petitions waiting in your inbox. Sometimes when a colleague visits, they'll eye your setup like it's a diagnostic tool. One glance at a crooked brush or a lopsided duster, and the judgment sets in: sloppy worker. On the flip side, a perfectly arranged rack and an immaculate inkstone can earn a silent nod of approval, maybe even a whispered compliment in the corridor. In a society obsessed with harmony, even your brush holder is a diplomatic envoy. You once overheard two junior clerks arguing about whether the order of brush sizes should follow cosmological principles. Big brush to the east, small brush to the west, aligning with heaven and earth. Historians still argue whether this kind of geomantic logic actually influenced office layouts, or whether it was just a clever excuse to rearrange desks midweek. You don't have the energy for metaphysical debates. You just like your desk to look like it belongs to someone who cares. Someone who might one day be promoted to head clerk, or at least someone who doesn't get side-eyed during inspections. You lift your feather duster one last time, give a gentle sweep across the inkwell lid, and set it neatly beside your elbow cushion. The tools are in place. The brushes stand like soldiers, ready for battle. You let out a breath, and then, because you're not made of stone, you take one brush and tap it gently against your palm, just to feel the bristles. Just to remind yourself that even in the most mundane corners of history, there's texture, care, and, if you squint hard enough, something almost beautiful. Your hand hovers over the scroll pile. You're not ready. Not just yet. Instead, you glance down to the true centerpiece of your bureaucratic sanctum, your inkstone, that squat little block of carved stone, sometimes mistaken by the uninitiated for a decorative coaster, is actually the beating heart of your entire operation. Without it, you're just a guy with nice brushes and nothing to write with. And yes, you do name in your head, call it Old Stone Face, because after a while, this thing knows your secrets better than any co-worker. Inkstones in the Tang Dynasty weren't just tools. They were part status symbol, part personal relic, and part low-key magic rock. Yours is modest, shale from the sheet inkstone quarries. Deep gray, with subtle swirls that look like smoke frozen in time. You picked it because it was the one that felt cool to the touch, but warmed quickly in your palm. You tell yourself it's practical. But secretly, you like the way the little carved clouds along the side catch the light at sunrise. To make ink, you pour a splash of water into the shallow well and grind an ink stick into a thick paste. The sound is half soothing, half ominous, like distant thunder. And yes, it takes time. Sometimes up to 5 minutes of slow, deliberate grinding just to get the right consistency. That's why many Tang officials show up a little early. Not to be productive, but to get the inkstone going while they sip their barley tea and gossip about whose sandals got repossessed. Historians still argue whether grinding ink was seen as part of a meditative practice or just a frustrating necessity. Some scholars believe the repetitive motion was meant to calm the bureaucrat's spirit before a long day of forms and footnotes. Others argue it was just the only way to get decent ink. Either way, your wrist is now professionally trained to do small circular motions for hours without complaint. If only your knees were that disciplined. Here's a fringe tidbit. One Tang-era manual recommended adding a single drop of rose water to your inkwell if writing letters of mourning, supposedly to soften the character strokes. Whether that emotional softening or actual viscosity science is unclear, but you tried it once. Smelled nice. Didn't make your grief any less bureaucratic. There are inkstones out there far fancier than yours. Some clerks keep ones inlaid with gold flecks or trimmed with jade. A few even have scented inkstones, which are either lightly infused with sandalwood or have been sitting near someone's lunch for too long. The emperor, naturally, had a personal inkstone with a silver drain spout and a matching spoon. You use your sleeve when things spill. Occasionally, your inkstone betrays you. If the water is too cold, the ink goes watery. If you grind too fast, it gets clumpy. The worst is the dry edge disaster. When the last inch of ink dries out mid-sentence, and you're left painting blotchy characters like a toddler with finger paints. You mutter something creative under your breath and regrind like nothing happened. There's etiquette here, too. You never borrow someone else's inkstone without permission. That's a weird intimacy, like wearing their socks or using their comb. Some old-school clerks even think inkstones absorb your energy, and that to touch another's is to disrupt the flow of their words. You don't believe it, but you also don't let anyone near Old Stone Face. After years of use, the center of your inkstone has worn smooth, a tiny crater formed by thousands of clockwise swirls. You've begun to see it as a clock, measuring the hours of your life spent calculating grain levies, drafting tax policy, and copying petitions about stolen goats. Your soul, slowly inked into stone. You reach for your ink stick, a dry black rod that smells faintly of pine soot. Technically, it's pine soot mixed with glue and compressed into a little rectangle of ambition. You rub it into the water with steady pressure, and a soft black bloom spreads across the surface like smoke in a bowl. It's kind of beautiful, kind of sad, kind of exactly what this job is. And just as you're about to dip your brush, here comes Assistant Clerk Duty, sash half-tied, hair disaster, asking if he can borrow a quick swirl of your inkstone. You smile like a monk, nod like a saint, and die a little inside. He doesn't swirl gently. He swirls like a dog in a mud puddle. But that's office politics. You let him borrow the stone. He owes you one, preferably in the form of backup scroll transcription. Next time the record's office, forget your lunch order again. There's something grounding about ink, though. The way it clings to the brush tip, the way it seeps into the page, drying into permanence. Tang Dynasty ink was famously black and glossy, and yours, if you get the consistency right, shines with a bluish shimmer. You've heard the phrase, ink as dark as raven's wings, so many times. It's almost a punchline, but when the brush moves just right and the strokes land with confidence, you get it. You really do. They say the best officials don't need to speak. Their writing speaks for them. Neat, precise characters reflect a neat, precise mind. At least, that's what the manual says. The same manual that also says to avoid smudging with your left wrist and not to sneeze on tax reports. Wisdom is wisdom. You wipe your brush gently along the rim of the inkstone. One last swirl. Then you lean forward, elbow cushion firm beneath you, feather duster the ready like a tiny sentry. Brush to paper. The day begins, not with a bang, but with a gentle scrape of pine soot on hemp paper. Old Stoneface watches silently, collecting secrets, ink and the occasional unsolicited prayer. The desk in front of you is a battlefield of scrolls, brushes, and inexplicable crumbs from someone else's breakfast. But next to the inkstone and that poor overused writing brush with a few split hairs is another desk essential that rarely gets its due. The brush rest. Yes, it's just a tiny ridge stand to cradle your calligraphy brush. But here, in your cramped cubicle of the Tang Dynasty, it's practically a throne. Yours is shaped like a sleeping dragon. 5 humps along its ceramic spine serve as gentle ridges to balance up to 5 brushes at a time. Do you own 5 brushes? No. Can you afford to look like someone who might need 5 brushes? Absolutely. Image is everything here. Your dragon's tail is chipped. Dee knocked it over during a tea spill, but you've come to see it as character. You even gave it a name, Shuin, possibly the only co-worker who listens and never interrupts. Historians still argue whether brush rests were purely functional or lean more toward personal flair. Some scholars suggest these little ceramic sculptures were a subtle form of aesthetic rebellion. When the rest of your life is ruled by a rigid hierarchy and 108 regulations about seal placement, choosing a brush rest shaped like a goose in sandals is your one shot at freedom. It's the Tang Dynasty version of putting a funny magnet on your office filing cabinet. Tang artisans crafted brush rests from everything: jade, porcelain, ivory, even polished bamboo. The lower-ranked scribes usually had the wooden ones, sometimes whittled during boring assignment reviews. You remember one unlucky junior clerk whose brush rest was just a rolled-up scrap of twine. You never let them forget it, not because you're cruel, but because ritualized teasing builds community, right? Your supervisor, Lord Way, has a brush rest made of celadone porcelain shaped like Mount Tai. Of course he does. He sets it right in the sunbeam so it glows like divine validation. And when he uses it, he makes a point of narrating every brush placement like it's a sacred rite. The brush must sleep before it dreams. Sure way. Meanwhile, your brush dreams of retirement. You lean forward and place your brush on Shuin's back with all the tenderness of a parent laying a child down to nap. The balance has to be just right. Bristles off the table, no drips, no slide. It's honestly harder than it looks. There's even a training scroll about it. How to handle your brush with dignity. Subtle judgment baked into the title. Nearby, someone's brush rest is a small silver fish, mouth open, tail curled. You admire it from a distance. Not because you're jealous. Okay, maybe a little, but mostly because it's bold. A little too bold. Fish-shaped brush rests were sometimes associated with wandering poets. People who didn't exactly scream dependable office work. So even the shape you choose could quietly suggest how seriously you take your job. Fringe detail incoming. At least one archaeologist found a Tang brush rest shaped like a pig wearing a scarf. Theories range from it being a joke gift to a reminder about gluttony and record-keeping. Either way, someone thought a pork-themed office accessory was the way to go. You respect that kind of commitment. Your desk sits by a window, which means the light shifts dramatically as the day goes on. The brush rest casts long shadows over your inkstone by mid-morning, like tiny mountains moving across a calm lake. You tell yourself it's poetic, but mostly it just makes it hard to see what you're writing. So you squint and pretend that's good for your calligraphy form. The worst part about brush rests? When you forget to clean them. Old ink drips turn into stubborn crusts that make your dragon look like it has a skin condition. You've tried soaking it, scraping it, whispering apologies to it. Nothing works. Eventually, you accept that Shuin will forever wear the battle scars of bureaucratic fatigue. Brush storage etiquette is real. No brush may touch another. No bristles may flatten. One guy in accounts kept jamming 3 brushes into his sleeve pocket like chopsticks. Now he wonders why his reports smudge. Meanwhile, your dragon sits there, silent and judgmental, elevating your tools like the tiny emperor it is. Sometimes, during long pauses between reports, you stare at the brush rest and let your thoughts drift. It becomes a boat floating down a calligraphy river. A reminder that the office may be dull, the task repetitive, but your desk, that sacred little rectangle of wood, is a shrine. A weird, slightly dusty shrine with snacks hidden in the back drawer, but a shrine nonetheless. And just when you're starting to romanticize your desk life too much, your scroll pile shifts. A gust of wind from the hallway fan sends half your petitions fluttering like startled birds. You lunge forward to catch them, crash into the table, knock Shuin sideways. Silence. You freeze. Check for cracks. Nothing broken, but your brush did a full somersault and landed bristles down into your tea bowl. You consider your options. Drink it anyway. Pretend it's artistic, or glare at do you again just on principle. You go with the glaring. This is what they don't show in court paintings. The drop brushes, the slightly crooked brush rests, the slow descent into paperwork-induced daydreams. They show scholar officials looking serene, immortal, contemplative. Not a one has tea stains on their sleeves, or a dragon-shaped rest with chipped tail. But that's the real history. Quiet little objects like your brush rest, they tell the story just as much as edicts and battle maps. They hold the fingerprints of quiet minds trying their best to look official while doodling birds in the margins of tax reports. So you straighten Shuin. You wipe the tea from the edge of your scroll. You gently squeeze your brush back into a passable point. And then you place it once more on that ceramic dragon's back, like a warrior returning to camp. And the work continues. You rest your elbow carefully on the edge of your desk. Not too close to the inkstone, not too close to the stack of rice paper memoranda waiting to be reviewed. This is the kind of muscle memory you've developed over years of bureaucratic survival. But today your elbow bumps something warm and fragrant. Your personal incense burner. It's a small bronze thing, slightly dented, shaped like a crouching lion with smoke curling from its open mouth. Its job? To make your work smell better than it feels. That incense, part sandalwood, part agarwood, and part who knows what from the market, was lit hours ago, and its lazy curls now hang in the air like sleepy serpents. Across the room, your colleague Fan has a lotus-shaped burner that sits atop a tiny platform carved to resemble waves. Fan is the kind of guy who writes footnotes to his own footnotes and judges your handwriting like it's a moral flaw. But his incense? Chef's kiss. Smells like a pine forest, having a nap. Historians still argue whether the use of incense in Tang offices was primarily for aroma, spiritual alignment, or pest control. Personally, you suspect it was all three. That, and masking the scent of damp silk, unwashed summer robes, and dried squid someone insists on storing in the communal cupboard. Lighting incense has become a tiny ritual of sanity. You roll the tiny charcoal pellet in your palm like a gambling token. Set it in the burner's belly and sprinkle the wood blend over it like fairy dust. A quiet hiss, a brief flicker of smoke, and then the world smells manageable again, even when the Imperial courier has just dropped off a scroll marked urgent in brushstrokes thick with panic. A quirky tidbit here. In at least one record, a low-ranking official was dismissed not for laziness or misconduct, but for accidentally setting his office rug on fire while refilling his incense burner. The memo describing it, wonderfully, ends with his judgment was scented, not sound. No notes. Your burner isn't just about the smell, of course. It's part of the decor equation. The office feng shui. Incense burners were often matched with other desk accessories in design or material. Bronze burner? Better pair it with a jade seal and at least a porcelain water dropper. Yours is technically mismatched, but if anyone asks, you'll say it's eclectic minimalism. Say it with enough conviction, and it becomes a trend. Some scribes believe the incense helped them focus. You're not sure it helps you concentrate, exactly, but it does give your day a rhythm. Every hour or so, you poke at the burner, watch the smoke slither up, and use it as an excuse to stretch. Think of it as your 9th century version of a coffee break, minus the caffeine, and awkward small talk near the hallway mirror. The scent profile can subtly change the vibe of your whole desk. Sandalwood feels meditative. Agarwood makes you feel like a philosopher. One time, in a moment of daring, you try to blend rumor to include dried orange peel and deer musk. The resulting aroma was described by Dewey as a monastery that's been locked for too long. You went back to sandalwood. There's also the matter of how the burner looks when not in use. You're painfully aware that visitors will glance at it, make a silent judgment, and mentally file it under tasteful, predictable, or trying too hard. In this office culture, where ambition hides behind every carved hairpin, your incense burner speaks louder than your actual voice most days. You once spotted an ivory burner shaped like a crane's egg. Perfectly smooth, entirely impractical, and outrageously expensive. The owner, naturally, was a nobleman's son playing a clerical life before inheriting land he didn't deserve. He kept his brush upside down and sniffed scrolls like wine. His incense smelled like overripe grapes. You try not to think about it too often. Still, you catch yourself occasionally drifting into the haze, watching the burner like it holds secrets. You imagine the smoke as a gentle current pulling your thoughts upstream, away from tax records and supply chain disputes, towards something older, maybe even sacred. After all, the Tang Dynasty borrowed incense traditions from Buddhist temples, where every puff of smoke carried a prayer skyward. Here in your little office shrine, though, the only prayers are probably muttered when the ink bleeds or someone spills tea on the census report. That said, you've developed a talent for shaping the smoke with a subtle wave of your sleeve, like a wizard casting an incredibly boring spell. By this coil of scented fog, I summon thee, competent handwriting. It's not all zen and scent, though. The ashes build up if you're not careful. Every few days, you use a tiny brush, made from repurposed eyebrow bristles, don't ask, to sweep out the belly of the lime burner. The sound of the brush against metal is oddly satisfying, like clearing away mental cobwebs. Sometimes you imagine each fleck of ash is a worry burned away. Then the next memo arrives, and the worries respawn. Today, your burner's tail is a little loose. You fiddle with it absent-mindedly as a scroll unrolls across your desk. The report is long, dull, and full of polite passive aggression. It would greatly please your humble subordinate if said road repair fund could be released prior to the fifth moon, else delay may be interpreted as disregard. You roll your eyes. Then you inhale, sandalwood and superiority. Even with all its silent judgments and ritual smoke, the incense burner is your favorite desk object. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't get reassigned to a northern post. It doesn't gossip or spill ink. It just sits there, quietly perfuming your frustrations into something almost poetic. And as the late afternoon sun slants through the window, catching the tendrils of fragrant smoke midair, you pause. For one glorious second, the world outside vanishes. There's no emperor, no edict, no paper mountain. Just you, your brush, and a little bronze lion exhaling serenity. Then from across the room, Fan sneezes dramatically and says, "Did someone mix camphor with their sandalwood again?" You return your gaze to the desk, where, among the items you've forgotten even had a purpose, your paperweights rest in quiet glory. They're heavy, decorative, and spiritually anchoring, sort of like middle management but less dramatic. Yours are carved from stone, smooth to the touch and veined with ancient swirls. One looks vaguely like a turtle. The other is supposedly a tiger. Although if you're honest, it more resembles a startled cat. Paperweights in the Tang Dynasty are not just functional, they're artistic decorations. You know this because yours were commented on during the prefect's inspection last spring. He called them unconventionally endearing, which is court code for I don't get it, but I'll let it slide. Your office mate Dewey, ever the traditionalist, uses an actual chunk of jade inscribed with a poem about loyalty. He claims it inspires him. You suspect he just likes that it makes a satisfying clunk when he slams it down during arguments. His jade is impressive, but scholars still argue whether jade paperweights had a more ritualistic purpose. Perhaps to protect important texts spiritually as well as physically. You once read a fringe commentary that suggested paperweights were also used in secret code transmission, if positioned at specific angles. They could allegedly signify different responses in silent meetings. You tried it once during a dull report presentation. No one noticed, or they mistook your tiger paperweight rotation as a signal that you needed more snacks. Beyond their use to keep scrolls from curling in the humid air, paperweights often doubled as conversation starters, or rivalry fuel. Yours had a faint scent when new, a hint of pine that faded with time. You liked to pretend it made the documents under it smell more important, as if anyone could sniff out bureaucratic significance. Their designs range from fierce to floral. Tigers, dragons, plum blossoms, and even gnarled old men with disproportionately large eyebrows. One guy in records has a pair of weights shaped like twin frogs wearing scholar hats. He claims they bring wisdom. They mostly just make people nervous. You think about how paperweights reflect personality. Yours, modest and a little chipped, matches your approach to bureaucracy. Efficient but not flashy. Dewey's jade reflects his polished ambition. Fan's paperweights are polished obsidian cubes, stark, cold, and perfectly square, much like his humor. There's something satisfying about the solid clink of stone against polished wood. You reposition one now, absent-mindedly pressing it against a rebellious edge of parchment that refuses to stay flat. It's a minor rebellion, paper against man, but you win this round with the turtle. Some clerks collect paperweights like others collect stamps or regrets. Entire side desks are filled with seasonal weights. Spring motifs for festival documents, autumn leaves for harvest reports, winter-themed designs complete with tiny cranes trudging through carved snow. You own precisely 2 weights because your desk is only so large, and also because you refuse to get into passive-aggressive paperweight contests with Fan. That way lies madness and debt. Historical records mention that paperweights were sometimes gifted between colleagues to signify respect or alliance. A jade crane, a bronze ox, even a ceramic rabbit. Each came with coded meanings. You once received a bamboo-carved paperweight from a temporary scribe who admired your calligraphy. You accidentally re-gifted it to someone else a week later and have felt morally compromised ever since. Paperweights could also be weaponized, metaphorically speaking. A pointed remark followed by a meaningful glance at one's tiger-shaped weight. That's how workplace diplomacy worked before reply-all emails existed. One particularly colorful account tells of an official who commissioned a paperweight shaped like a miniature court pavilion. Its roof lifted to reveal a tiny ink pot. He called it the seat of reason. It leaked ink constantly and stained every document beneath it. He defended it anyway, claiming the blemishes represented the messiness of truth. He was reassigned within the month. You peer closer at the grain of the stone in your turtle weight. The way light catches in the tiny fissures reminds you of riverbeds in the south, those warm, shallow waters where you once took a detour to avoid a tax audit trip. You got mildly sunburned and wrote your only half-decent poem there. These are the kinds of memories office decor unlocks, unexpectedly, like the scent of certain teas or the creak of old floorboards under soft shoes. Sometimes when the day drags and the brush feels heavy in your fingers, you spin the tiger weight in your hand and pretend it's a compass. Which direction would you go if this weren't your life? Toward poetry? Toward rebellion? Or just toward the nearest roadside pancake stall? The answer changes daily. Fan, seeing you twirling the paperweight, asks without looking up, bored or plotting? Both, you reply. He nods approvingly. A shared language of the disenchanted. You once heard of a rare set of paperweights made from meteoric iron, allegedly cursed, supposedly magnetic, probably made up. But your dreams still occasionally feature weights that whisper forgotten characters into your ear, their shadows spelling secret policies in moonlight. You wake with ink on your sleeve and no recollection of writing anything. In this world of stifling repetition, your weights ground you, not just physically, though yes, they do stop that draft from lifting your reports, but emotionally. They're the one part of your job you chose freely. You weren't assigned these weights by a superior. You didn't inherit them. You bought them on impulse, one rainy afternoon when your sandal straps broke, and you ducked into a shop smelling of wet ink and camphor. Now, each time you anchor a report beneath their weight, it feels less like a task and more like a quiet defiance. You, an anonymous cog in the wheel of imperial administration, choosing which rocks stay and which scrolls fly. Outside, rain begins to patter softly on the tiled roof. The turtle glints under the window's gray light. You reach out, tap it once, and watch the scroll settle flat. A tiny victory, yours alone. The rain outside trickles into steady rhythm, syncing with the soft rustle of parchment beneath your fingers. You adjust the position of your sleeves, a habit more than necessity, and your eyes drift across the desk to the one item that never moves, your brush stand. Tall, lacquered, and carved with clouds that look vaguely like startled chickens, it holds your most essential companions, your writing brushes. Each brush rests like a soldier in formation, though some lean slightly, having seen more use than others. The smallest one, trimmed with fine weasel hair, is for signing your name on inconsequential reports, like grain weight audits or tea leaf shortages in the western provinces. You've used it so many times that the tip curves like a sleepy eyebrow. Then there's your prize brush, made with wolf hair and bound in a handle of dark sandalwood. You reserve for ceremonial calligraphy or unusually spicy workplace memos. Brushes are more than tools. They're extensions of your thoughts. The way swords are to warriors or ladles are to soup-obsessed aunties. And in the Tang Dynasty, possessing a collection of fine brushes is a mark of both social standing and, let's be honest, subtle ego projection. You remember when Fan brought in his new brush, the one with a crane motif carved along the shaft. He unrolled a poem he'd copied that morning just to test the stroke quality. You and Dewey took turns pretending to squint appreciatively. Historians still argue whether such brush displays were acts of genuine artistry, or just a bureaucratic version of revving a luxury chariot outside the office. Brushes came in every variety imaginable: goat hair for softness, horsehair for elasticity, and the ever-controversial ear hair of the yellow fox, rumored to possess a supernatural affinity for imperial edicts. You're not sure you believe that, but Dee swears his yellow fox brush helped him write a petition that actually got approved. You suspect the reviewer was just bored and amused. What's undeniable is how each brush feels different in your grip. There's a slight bounce with the goat hair brush, as if the strokes are trying to escape mid-sentence. The rabbit hair one, technically illegal now due to shortage, is absurdly precise. Too precise, in fact. You use it once, and the characters look like they've been drawn by a calligraphy demon with obsessive-compulsive tendencies. Fan called it terrifyingly neat. You took it as a compliment. Most desks like yours would have at least 3 working brushes, a ceramic rinse bowl, and an inkstone that may or may not double as a stress object. Yours is a simple square inkstone, but the grooves are worn just so, a perfect fit for the circular motion you make each morning to grind the ink stick. It squeaks faintly as the black ink thickens, a sound oddly satisfying, like snapping open a scroll seal or cracking your knuckles before a long passive-aggressive letter. There's also the water dropper, easy to overlook, but essential. Yours is shaped like a fat frog that vomits exactly 3 drops of water when tilted. Dewey's is a dragon, naturally. Fan's is a cube, because of course it is. These droppers control the ink's thickness, and therefore the mood of the words. Runny ink? You're feeling loose, maybe rebellious. Thick, rich ink? Probably trying to impress someone or cover up a spelling error. One of the quirks of brushwork in your role is how much emotional subtext it carries. An underlined stroke can suggest urgency. Overly sharp angles? Frustration. Too much ink? You're either nervous or had too much rice wine with lunch. That one time you submitted a report during allergy season, your sneezes left tiny splatters on the characters. The prefect returned it with a red ink note. Consider revising tone. Of course, not everyone respects the art. Some officials use brushwork like a battering ram, thick, rush strokes, as if their word were trying to wrestle their way off the page. You once saw a report where the ink had pooled so badly, the characters looked like they'd melted in the sun. Fan theorized it was a deliberate protest. Dee suggested it was just cheap ink. You leaned toward indigestion-induced haste. Calligraphy contests aren't uncommon among your peers. Once a month, someone tries to casually outright everyone else. Last time it was Shuin, the records clerk with a suspiciously clean desk. Her characters curved with terrifying elegance, and her brush didn't squeak once. You spent the next week practicing under moonlight, which helped your brushwork, but did absolutely nothing for your sleep schedule. Some fringe scholars argue that the shape of a bureaucrat's handwriting influenced how their reports were interpreted by superiors. Rounded strokes implied humility, while firm hooks suggested decisive action. You once tried a flamboyant swirl on the word rice, just to see what would happen. Your entire requisition was denied, with a side note. Rice does not require theatrics, but there's comfort in the ritual. Grinding the ink, dipping the brush, that first stroke across the page, like stepping into a familiar pond. There's a rhythm to it, a softness. The bristles kiss the parchment like falling feathers. It quiets the mind, even as your body aches from hours hunched at the desk. This is where thoughts form most clearly, in brush and ink, not in spoken word. Talk can be twisted. Ink, though, it stains with intention. You've read accounts of poets who claimed to see visions as they wrote, the brush guiding their hands beyond conscious will. You've only experienced that once, and it turned out you'd accidentally dipped your sleeve in the ink bowl and were slowly fainting from fumes. Still, it was a pretty good poem. On the side of your inkstone, someone long before you carved a line of verse. The characters are faded, but you trace them once and match them to an old drinking song about paperwork. No, really. A bureaucrat's lament. Scrolls grow longer / as my hair grows whiter / and still I wait / for promotion's whisper. You think about that often, especially on rainy days like this one. As the daylight starts to dim, you dip your brush again and test a character on the margin. It comes out clean and balanced, your hand steady despite the fog of tea and repetition. You realize, not for first time, that brushwork is the only art you've truly mastered. Not poetry, not music, not even the delicate office politics of water dropper gifting. But this black ink on pale parchment, shaped by hair, hand, and habit. You lean back slightly, brushes upright, frog dropper empty, the scent of sandalwood and ink rising faintly around you. Outside, The rain drums on, oblivious of the bureaucracy you're beautifying. A quiet thunk echoes in the office as you gently shut the bamboo scroll box. A sound so minor, and yet oddly satisfying, like the whisper click of a well-made fan snapping open in the heat. You stretch your fingers, brush calluses pressing into each other, as your joints crack like soft rice crackers. You spent the afternoon drafting a personnel report, reorganizing lines of thought with surgical precision, and adjusting the alignment of titles that seem to shift subtly every time you glance away. But now it's decoration hour. Tang Dynasty officials never officially referred to it as such, of course. Maintaining a dignified working environment was a more bureaucratically acceptable phrase. But let's be real, you and your colleagues were decorating. Your desk wasn't just a place to suffer through provincial tax assessments. It was your miniature kingdom, and every object upon it was a tiny expression of taste, aspiration, or petty rivalry. The first item you reach for is your miniature bronze crane, perched dramatically on one leg, and looking like it knows something you don't. It serves no purpose, doesn't even double as a paperweight, but you keep it front and center. You found it at a night market tucked between a table of melon seeds and someone loudly selling authentic Song Dynasty relics that were suspiciously sticky. You like the crane because it watches your visitors, its tiny eyes catching candlelight like it's judging their Confucianism. Across from it is your ink scent sachet, a ridiculous but trendy innovation. It looks like a dumpling made of brocade, and is stuffed with crushed sandalwood, a bit of lavender, and, controversially, a few dried chrysanthemum petals. Dee insists the floral overtone is effeminate, but you notice he started wearing one too. Historians still argue whether scent sachets in offices were practical aroma masks for inkwell stench or just vanity accessories that helped lonely clerks feel slightly fancy. There's also your bamboo brush holder, shaped like a scroll unfurling in the wind. Fan once suggested it looked like a loofah in a windstorm, but you countered by pointing out a calligraphy rock looked like a burnt dumpling. This is the ongoing decor Cold War between Tang officials. Subtle critiques, elaborate justifications, and the occasional late-night reorganization binge inspired by overheard compliments. Your desk mat, a square of pale silk printed with a faint landscape, is arguably your boldest choice. It's mostly mountains, piney and mist-drenched, but if you look closely in the corner, there's a tiny fisherman who appears to be sighing. You added that yourself, painting him in with a fine brush one night after a bit too much osmanthus wine. The next morning, you regretted it. But now, he's family. There are rumors that some officials commission miniature desk gardens, bonsai trees, tiny rock arrangements, even small vases holding a single plum blossom. You don't go that far, though D once showed off a pebble and moss combo he called Mount Integrity. You suspect it was just an excuse to avoid paperwork by misting moss for 20 minutes. That being said, desk accessories were not merely decorative. They were strategic. A jade seal placed just so suggests importance. A framed poem hints at literacy, possibly emotional complexity. Even your choice of cup matters. You drink tea from a celadone cup with a chip rim, deliberately so. You claim it keeps you humble, though really, you just like how it feels, slightly uneven against your lip, as if your tea is challenging you to stay awake. You know someone who had a gold-rimmed cup shaped like a lotus. They spilled tea into a promotion list once and were never seen again. Coincidence? Probably. But you keep your modest celadone. It's safe, humble, mostly stain-proof. Every object has a story. The bronze paperweight shaped like a tiger? A gift from your first mentor, who told you, in this office, better to be a quiet tiger than a loud rooster. The jade screen that folds across your inkwell, found in a pawn shop, while avoiding an awkward meeting with the regional grain envoy. Even your sparing stick, chipped, dry, and unlovely, has value. You keep it for the days when your good ink runs out and desperation drives innovation. There's an entire subculture around gifting desk items. Promotions often result in brush holders appearing mysteriously, gifts from those trying to curry favor. Once, someone sent you a lacquered pen rest in the shape of a leaping carp. You weren't sure what to make of it. Was it a compliment on your ambition? A comment on your habit of flopping dramatically onto your desk at the end of the day? Historians still argue whether such symbolic gifts carried intended meanings, or were simply regifted from someone else's awkward collection. You once started a trend unintentionally. After writing a sardonic couplet and tacking it to your divider, Fan copied the idea and added his own version. Within a week, the office turned into a haiku battleground. Yours read, "Scrolls fall like rain / reports stacked to mountaintops / I have lost my brush." D added one. "Tea is now ink / my soul smells of wet parchment / I long for noodles." Eventually, the supervisor made everyone take them down, but for a moment, it felt like literary rebellion. Speaking of tea, you always have a teapot on your desk. Not the big, elegant ones for entertaining, but a squat ceramic pot shaped like a turtle. The lid sticks slightly, but the way it steams after the first pour feels like a silent exhale. You drink chrysanthemum when you're trying to be productive, oolong when you've given up. The turtle, of course, reminds you to slow down, or so you claim. Really, it was on sale. It's easy to forget that desks in your era aren't like the vast wooden tables of modern fantasies. Yours is small, just enough space to write and rest your elbows without knocking anything over. Every inch matters. That's why the placement of each object becomes a ritual. The brush stand to the right, the inkstone directly in front, the bronze crane angled slightly toward the doorway, because fans said it wards off overachievers. The desk is where you live, most days. Not your house, not the streets bustling with vendors yelling about bean curd discounts. Here, with your brushes and your dumb crane, and your poetry mat that smells faintly of ink and sandalwood and mild despair. Decorating it doesn't make the work lighter, but it does make it yours. In a world of rigid ranks and endless regulations, that's something, even if the promotions don't come. Even if your best memo was ignored. Even if, sometimes, the only joy you get from a day's work is the way the candlelight gleams off your jade paperweight. You look around your desk and see a life's quiet resistance, a slow rebellion in bronze, silk, and ink. You slide open the desk drawer with the same care you'd use to unwrap a dumpling from a delicate rice wrapper. Carefully, reverently, like it might squeak in protest or explode into a puff of Confucian rules. Inside, the usual clutter greets you. Folded appointment schedules, stray brush caps, and that tiny wooden stamp you never use but still feel too guilty to throw away. It's a tiny universe in miniature, more honest than anything you file. Somewhere in that drawer is the seal of your office, carved from modest soapstone and wrapped in cloth like a baby chicken winter. You only take out for official reports, and even then you hesitate. The weight of bureaucracy quite literally rests in your hand. The seal means authority. It means something left your desk and could haunt you for the next 3 reign periods. The Tang Dynasty loves its paperwork. More than gold, more than silks, more arguably than tea, though that's close. Paper is your empire, and you are its weary calligrapher. You don't just write memos. You perform brush ballet across scrolls of imperial linen paper, painstakingly outlining supply shortages in Guangling or over-enthusiastic tax collectors inching due. Most bureaucrats were obsessed with penmanship, and you are no exception. That isn't just about aesthetics, though, yes, crooked characters could get you quietly mocked. It's about credibility. A slanted signature might hint at laziness, even corruption. Historians still argue whether bad calligraphy was ever used as official evidence in misconduct cases, but you wouldn't be surprised if it was. And then there's the ink. Always the ink. You grind your own. Thank you very much. Not because you're a purist, but because store-bought sticks tend to smell like they've been stored in someone's boot. Yours is made from soot and glue, mixed with a few flecks of ground pearl. That last bit is purely indulgent, like oat milk in a latte, but it gives the characters a shimmer when the candlelight hits them just right. There's a rhythm to your writing routine. You tap the inkstone twice. Once for luck, once because the stone has a chip and the tap reminds you not to press too hard. You dab your brush gently. Twist it until the tip looks like a pine needle, and begin. The strokes feel alive. Some days they dance. Some days they sulk. But either way, they get written. Dewey, of course, uses a brush with a rabbit hair tip, claiming it gives his characters noble aggression. Fan sticks with goat hair, softer, more forgiving. You once tried using horsehair. It felt like writing with a grudge. Your office also contains a ledger, several, actually, meticulously bound and labeled in red ink. They're filled with rows of names, dates, quotas, and notes. So many notes. Some of them you can barely read later because you write them while eating lunch or mid-yawn. Your favorites are the passive-aggressive ones. Investigate supply delay again. Or, merchantly very persuasive, watch him. Buried inside the margins of one of those ledgers, in handwriting far too elegant to be yours, is a haiku left by a predecessor. Scribes rise with the dawn. Ink bleeds truth and exaggeration. Paper forgets none. You've left it untouched. It's your quiet little superstition. There's also a desk-side scroll rack, a wooden stand shaped like a tiny ladder. Most of your scrolls are practical. Tax records, regional maps, crop predictions. But hidden behind them is a poetry scroll you unroll when no one's looking. It's filled with moon verses and river laments, and that one oddly sensual poem about lychee that you're pretty sure breaks 3 decorum laws. You tell yourself it's for balance, e'en to your bureaucratic yawn. During downtime, which is rare, but sacred, you tend to rearrange your drawer items. You file the seals by size, line up the scrolls by paperweight, and refold your rag cloths with monastic focus. You once spent an entire afternoon reorganizing your report tabs by emotion, hopeful, bleak, extremely bleak, and delivered with fruit. The air in your office is thick with the scent of ink, old paper, sandalwood, and occasionally the ghost of roasted chestnuts from the alley vendor. The candle wax drips slowly, hypnotically. Time slows down in here. There's no loud fanfare, no ringing bells, just the soft whisper of a brush against paper and the occasional hum you let slip when a line of characters comes out just right. Sometimes, between the endless documentation of warehouse grain and complaints about bridge repairs, you catch yourself daydreaming. Not escape, exactly, just other offices. Maybe in Luoyang, where the weather's milder and the teas supposed to be sweeter. Maybe one of those mythical outdoor desks in a pavilion. You could work with the wind rustling your scrolls and complain about humidity instead of drafty walls. You once heard a rumor about an official who worked entirely from a traveling desk, something with folding legs and silk compartments. Historians still argue whether this was efficient genius or just a form of ancient work-from-home rebellion. Either way, you admire the audacity. Your own desk has a hidden compartment. Tiny, barely the width of a scroll, but deep enough to hide something flat. Right now, it holds a folded letter from your cousin, a joke drawing from Fan, you as a turtle in a scholar hat, and a dried flower you don't remember picking. You rarely open it. It's comforting just to know it's there. Sometimes, late at night, you find yourself staring at the glow of your candle reflected on your bronze crane, wondering if anything you wrote that day will matter in 100 years. Will someone study your careful notations and marvel at your penmanship? Or will your scrolls be recycled into makeshift window covers? Still, you write, because maybe some future scribe will find your old poem about lychee and chuckle. Or maybe they'll see your name on a tax log and think, at least he made it neat. The hours crawl and you don't mind. This is your space. Your quiet rebellion against the roar of dynasties. Your legacy, scrawled in ink that smells like pine smoke and stubborn hope. You've barely set your brush down when the faint shuffle of sandals echoes down the hallway. Dewey appears in the doorway with the kind of look reserved for 3 things: incoming disasters, surprise audits, or free snacks. He's holding a scroll tightly. So tightly, in fact, that the ends are crumpling like sad dumplings. You need to see this, he whispers, though there's no one around to overhear. You take it with the solemnity of a monk receiving a prophecy, unroll it, and blink. It's an office decoration request form. Apparently, the Grand Chancellor is calling for a new aesthetic directive. Yes, that's the exact phrasing, and all regional bureaus must update the decorative standards of their workspaces to reflect Tang values and present-appropriate dignity to visiting parties, foreign or otherwise. That means you sigh, not because you mind decorating, but because Tang values is a phrase that can mean anything from add more bamboo to please display a live crane next to your filing cabinet. Historians still argue whether these edicts were designed for cohesion or simply to keep middle-ranking clerks too busy to organize a mutiny. Still, this presents a new challenge. You glance around your office like it's a contestant on a makeover show. Let's assess the damage. The good: your inkstone is well maintained. The candle holders are symmetrical. There's a pleasant herbal sachet hanging discreetly near the window. The bad: that scroll rack is dangerously close to collapse. One of the legs on your desk wobbles when it rains. And the bamboo mat beneath your chair looks like it's been through a bureaucratic battle or two. Dewey suggests a calligraphy scroll with the word serenity, which is ironic, given how frantically he's suggesting it. Fan leans in from the adjoining office and mumbles something about miniature rock gardens. You're intrigued but skeptical. The last time someone tried to install a water feature, the moisture warped half their ledger. Still, it gives you ideas. You remember seeing a porcelain brush holder shaped like a reclining ox in the market. It was silly, but oddly comforting. Maybe that would work. You don't need your desk to look like a temple. Just lived in, peaceful, a space that tells visitors, yes, taxes are boring, but we do them with flair. You make a list, because you're a Tang bureaucrat, and that's what you do. Replace the bamboo mat, polish the bronze crane, move the window scroll to center alignment. Buy one decorative item that sparks mild joy. The market is bustling by the time you arrive. Vendors call out with the enthusiasm of street poets, offering silks, teas, and an unreasonable number of objects shaped like peaches. You spot a low wooden sign reading office embellishments and more, which is either perfect or a trap. Inside, it's a decorative wonderland. Fans painted with mountain scenes. Ceramic pots shaped like lotus blossoms. Brush holders with more animal shapes than the Imperial Zoo. You pick up a jade figurine of a turtle balancing a coin on its back. For a moment, it seems to wink at you. Probably just dust. You settle on two items. A smooth black river stone carved with Confucian saying roughly, "Boredom breeds discipline," and a small pine bonsai in a blue glazed dish. It's dignified, low maintenance, and vaguely smells like calm. The trip back is uneventful, except for one scholar who nearly walks into a pole while reading and walking. Again, that's the third time this month. You consider submitting a formal recommendation. Install benches for mobile readers. You'd sign it anonymously, of course. Back at your desk, you arrange the items with surgeon-like precision. The bonsai goes to far right, near the candle. The river stone nestles in the center of your workspace, just behind your inkstone. Balanced, harmonious, a little bit smug. Fan strolls in, takes one look, and nods. "Respectable," he says. "Just one missing thing." "What?" "A mildly threatening proverb carved into a wall panel." You laugh. Quietly, of course, because this is still a government building. As the day goes on, you notice something strange. The new decor changes your rhythm. You write a little slower, but neater. You pause between memos and find yourself admiring the way the pine needles catch the light. Even your passive-aggressive ledger notes feel a touch more poetic. Midway through the afternoon, a junior courier stops by. He freezes, eyes the desk, and whispers, "Sir, is that a real bonsai?" You nod. He looks visibly shaken. "I thought only level 5 scribes had those." He bows and backs out like you've just threatened to promote him. You smile. For once, it feels nice to win at something that isn't grain inventory. Of course, not everyone's on board. The assistant overseer in the office upstairs sends a politely worded note suggesting that plants invite ants and unpolished stones symbolize moral decay. You consider reply with your own calligraphy scroll reading. Worry less about other people's stones. But you settle for, "Thank you for your concern. I will monitor the ants vigilantly." Historians still argue whether Tang officials use desk decor for status signaling or spiritual comfort. Probably both. After all, a well-placed brush stand could say, "I am orderly," while a wind-swept landscape painting behind your chair screamed, "I yearn for retirement." Even the emperor's desk, according to rumor, had a miniature ink garden, complete with single koi fish. No one knows if it's true, but the idea of His Majesty swatting flies away from a water bowl while dictating military reforms is too delicious not to believe. You finish your last memo of the day with a final flourish. The sun outside has dipped low, and your office glows in amber tones. The candle flickers gently. The pine bonsai stands proudly, and the carved river stone reminds you to embrace the tedium. Decorating your desk hasn't transformed your job, but it's made it yours. This little patch of the empire belongs to you, a quiet corner where bureaucracy and beauty cohabitate like two slightly grumpy roommates. You look around and think, yes, this will do.